Today, we uncover the 5 tea brands the UK should be warning about. Companies bleaching their products white to make them look more appealing. And tea bags so full of dust and fannings that calling it a cup of tea is starting to feel generous. For most of us, tea isn't just a drink. It's a ritual, a daily habit woven into British life for generations. A moment of comfort, clarity or calm. But slowly, quietly, without most people ever realizing, that ritual has been taken away from us. What was once a simple, wholesome brew has become an industrial product, engineered, processed and packaged in ways our grandparents would never recognize. And the worst part, many of us still assume we're drinking the same teas Britain grew up on. But it wasn't always like this. Tea in the UK used to be whole leaf, brewed slowly in real pots, strained by hand and enjoyed the way nature intended. No bleached paper, no heat-sealed polymers, no bags packed with ultrafine dust designed to brew in 20 seconds. Just leaves, water, time and a flavour that developed naturally. Compare that to today. Most supermarket tea bags are a blend of microscopic particles, leftovers from multiple countries, and materials that interact with boiling water long before the tea itself does. And the companies know something they don't want you to realize. If you understood how simple tea used to be and how easy it still is to brew it the old way, you might never go back to their packaged blends again. So they work hard to keep the modern system in place. Fast brew dust leftovers sourced from multiple countries, over-processed leaves, bags treated to look cleaner and whiter than the tea inside. Convenience over quality, presentation over tradition, appearance over health. Now, we're not saying all tea bags are bad. Far from it. But as we go through this investigation, do yourself a favour and just make sure your favourite brew isn't on this list.
Number 1. Twinings. A name so old and established that most of us treat it as a mark of certainty. The brand has a royal warrant, a storefront on the Strand dating back to the 1700s, and packaging that feels traditional, elegant, and trustworthy. But behind that heritage image sits something most shoppers never think about: the bright, pure white tea bags themselves. They don't look that way naturally. Twinings uses an oxygen bleaching process on its tea bag paper to achieve that spotless, uniform look. It isn't chlorine-based, but it's still a deliberate whitening treatment done purely for presentation. Because unbleached tea paper looks darker, more textured, and less clean. And in today's supermarket aisle, appearance sells faster than authenticity. But the one question we all need to be asking is which one of us asked for washing powder white tea bags in the first place? I know I'd much prefer to see the real colour without anything from the bleaching process finding its way into my cup. Some would say it's like they make all the decisions without a care in the world for what we end up putting into our bodies. According to them, the crisp white bag gives the impression of a high-purity product, but they can't hide the fact that what's inside it tells a completely different story. Twinings Everyday, the blend most people buy without thinking twice, isn't made from whole leaves like the company's historical image might suggest. It's made from very fine fannings, tiny fragments of leaf created during the tea leaf sorting process. These pieces brew quickly and provide colour fast, but they also lose the complexity, aroma, and subtlety that made British tea what it once was. Fannings are efficient for mass production, not for flavour. They create a cup that's consistent and strong, but not necessarily rich or nuanced. Even the construction of the bag itself is different from what people imagine. Twinings often uses stitched bags with cotton thread, folded and pressed in a way designed for speed and uniformity. It's a modern industrial process that has very little in common with the handcrafted brewing traditions that built the Twinings name centuries ago. Because when Twinings first began, their tea wasn't sold in paver bags at all. It was sold loose, whole leaf stored in metal canisters, weighed out in hand in tea shops. Customers could see the leaves, smell them, judge their quality with their own eyes. Brewing tea meant warming a pot, adding whole leaves and letting them steep slowly before straining. There were no bleached papers, no stitch bags, no heat-sealed fibers, and no fast brew particles engineered for convenience. Tea was a slow ritual, and that ritual was inseparable from quality. Today, the story is different. The heritage remains on the box, but the product has evolved into a fast brew, supermarket-friendly version of what tea used to be. Twinings still carries the traditions in its branding, but the everyday blend most people drink is far removed from the slow, whole-leaf brewing Britain once knew. Number 2. PG Tips, a household name, a staple in millions of kitchens, and one of the brands many people think of when they picture a proper British brew. For decades, PG Tips built its reputation on strength, familiarity, and reliability. But in recent years, shoppers across the UK have noticed something different about their daily cup, and it starts with the bag itself. PG Tips made headlines when it switched to 100% plant-based bags, replacing traditional polypropylene with a corn-derived material called PLA. On the surface, this sounds like progress, greener packaging, better sustainability, a step forward. But what most shoppers don't realize is that PLA doesn't break down in normal home compost. It needs industrial-level heat for proper breakdown, meaning that, for the average household, the new bags behave almost exactly the same as the old ones. They don't disappear, they just look better on paper. And for many loyal drinkers, the change hasn't just been about the bag. The taste itself shifted. Reviews began pouring in with the same message. PG Tips didn't brew the way it used to. Cups felt weaker, flatter, or oddly inconsistent, even when using the same amount of sugar, milk, and steep time as always. Some people reported needing 2 bags instead of 1. Others said that color seemed to develop quickly, but the flavor lagged behind. Strong on the surface, but thin underneath. This pattern makes sense when you understand how the tea inside the bag is built. PG Tips relies heavily on extremely fine tea particles, full of fannings and dust, the cheapest leftovers. These tiny fragments brew fast, producing a strong color in seconds, but that speed comes at the cost of depth. Whole leaves release flavor slowly. Dust releases everything at once. It gives a punch, but it doesn't give complexity. For a long time, this worked because the pyramid bag allowed more movement. But as the bag design changed, and as blends continued adjusting for uniformity and volume, something in the cup changed with it. What made PG Tips iconic wasn't the convenience, it was the flavor people grew up with. The comforting, recognizable brew that felt the same whether you drank it at home, at work, or in a roadside cafe. But today, the experience is different. The ritual has been streamlined into a fast brew product built for consistency, not character. The bag has changed, the blend has changed, and the cup has changed as a result. Number 3. As that everyday tea bags. On paper, they should be the safe, no-frills choice, the kind of thing you buy in bulk, throw in the cupboard, and forget about. And for years, that's exactly how a lot of shoppers used them. People trusted them. Some reviewers say they'd been buying them for years, even decades. But if you look at the recent reviews, something clearly has changed. And it isn't just a one-off bad batch, it's a pattern. The single loudest theme is simple: the bags don't hold. Over and over again, long-time buyers say the bags now split as soon as boiling water hits them, or with the slightest stir, or even while they're still sitting in a cup. Some people say half the box goes straight in the bin. Others say it can take 3 or 4 attempts just to get one drinkable cup. One reviewer joked that the bags might as well be sold as a loose leaf. Another called them dissolving tea bags because the moment water is added, the bag seems to give up. And this isn't one angry comment, it's dozens of people saying the same thing. Used to be great, now they constantly burst. But the more you read, the more you realize this isn't just an annoyance about mess. When a bag splits, you're not just brewing tea, you're drinking the contents in a way you weren't supposed to. Reviewers talk about cups full of mud, grit, and grey dust floating on top. Several mentioned getting a mouthful of leaves at the bottom, or having to stop drinking halfway because of the sludge collecting there. One even compared it to backwash. And the uncomfortable truth is that if your everyday tea bags are regularly bursting or leaking, there's a good chance you're swallowing far more of the tiny particles and dust from inside the bag than you would ever choose to if you could see it all laid out on a spoon. Then there's the flavor. A lot of reviewers say the tea used to taste strong and reliable, but now swings between weak, tasteless, or oddly off, like herb-like, chemical, rubbery, or simply like hot water with a bit of milk. Some people say they now need 2 bags just to get any taste at all. Others said they had to throw whole boxes away because they couldn't finish even 1 cup. A few people point out something that should worry any supermarket. They were converted from big brands like PG Tips or Tetley and are now switching back, not because of price, but because Asda's own bags are not fit for purpose. Taken together, the message from Asda's own customers is pretty blunt. These weren't always bad. They were once good enough that people bought them for years without complaint. But whatever has changed, the paper, the seams, the blend, or the cost-cutting, has left shoppers with cups full of dust, wasted kettles, and the uneasy feeling that they're drinking more of the bag than the brew.
Number 4. Tetley. One of the biggest names in British tea, a brand so embedded into our routines that most people don't question it for a second. Tetley has always marketed itself as familiar, reliable, and down-to-earth, the kind of tea your parents drank, your grandparents drank, and half the country still drinks today. But when you look a little closer at how Tetley builds its tea bags, the story becomes far less comforting. Tetley publicly states something most shoppers have never noticed. Their tea bags are not fully plastic-free. They're about 99% biodegradable, which sounds impressive at first, but that final 1% is where all the questions start. That tiny fraction comes from the heat seal layer that holds the bag together. It's a small amount of polymer, but without it, the bag would simply fall apart in boiling water. And Tetley produces these bags on an enormous scale, tens of millions of them every single day. So while 1% plastic doesn't seem like much, when multiplied across the country's daily tea habit, it becomes a stream of microparticles entering hot water again and again. It's the kind of thing people never think about, because for decades, tea bags were assumed to be just paper. But Tetley's own statements confirm that there's still a plastic component keeping the seams intact. Not enough to worry the average shopper, until you start asking how that 1% behaves when steeped in boiling water day after day, cup after cup. And inside the bag, Tetley uses blends built for speed and consistency. The everyday products rely heavily on small tea particles rather than whole leaves. They brew quickly, give fast color, and create a predictable taste whether you make 1 cup or 100. It's efficient, it's reliable, and it's been the backbone of Tetley's brand for decades. But efficiency always comes at a cost. When leaves are processed into tiny fragments, the flavor profile changes. The ritual becomes faster, but the depth of the tea, the natural variation, the subtlety, disappears. Tetley also sources its tea from a vast global network of plantations. While the company promotes its sustainability partnerships and certifications, the blends themselves are built for volume, not craftsmanship. The tea travels long distances, sits in storage, gets blended and reblended to maintain uniformity, and eventually ends up in a plastic-sealed paper bag, meant to brew in under a minute. Tetley still carries the comfort of heritage in its branding, but the cup in your hands today is the result of industrial-scale efficiency, not the slower, simpler tea culture Britain once knew. And while most people never question what their tea bag is made from, Tetley's own admission, that last 1%, is something worth remembering.
Number 5. Yorkshire Tea. The one brand people will defend with their whole personality. Yorkshire Tea isn't just a drink, it's an identity. It's the brand people swear by, the one they travel with when going abroad, the one they argue about online. For many, it's the gold standard of a proper brew. And that's exactly why this one stings. Because behind the cozy marketing, behind the rolling hills on the box and the promise of a proper Yorkshire brew, Yorkshire Tea has more in common with the big industrial tea brands than most loyal drinkers realise. Let's start with the bag itself.
Yorkshire Tea has been under pressure for years to ditch plastic, and while they've slowly shifted toward plant-based materials, a significant number of their bags still rely on the older polypropylene sealing. That means every time you pour boiling water onto the bag, especially if it's from an older batch, you're releasing microscopic particles you never intended to drink. Not the paper, not the fibre, the sealing glue holding the bag together. And given Yorkshire Tea's massive popularity, that adds up to millions of cups brewed this way every single day. But the bag is just the start. Yorkshire Tea's reputation rests heavily on the idea of craftsmanship, a proper blend, carefully sourced, using the best leaves. Yet when you look into their supply chain, it's clear the brand is drawing from the same enormous international plantations that supply almost every other mass-market tea. Their blends come from places like Kenya, Assam, and Sri Lanka. And while that sounds exotic, the reality behind it isn't always romantic. Several investigations over the years have highlighted concerns around working conditions on certain plantations in those regions, including low pay, overwork, and exposure to dangerous agricultural chemicals. Yorkshire Tea, like most major brands, insists they audit and monitor suppliers. But when you're sourcing tea on a scale big enough to supply millions of boxes worldwide, oversight becomes complicated and quality becomes stretched thin. Then there's the blend itself. People often describe Yorkshire Tea as strong, but strength doesn't always come from higher quality leaves. A stronger brew can simply mean more small leaf particles, more fannings, and a darker, more forceful cup, designed to impress quickly. It's engineered reliability, not necessarily heritage craftsmanship. Yorkshire Tea's special editions are even more telling. They're biscuit brew that tastes like biscuits without containing any biscuits, or their hard water brew, which is essentially a darker, dustier blend meant to overpower mineral-heavy water. And while the branding leans heavily on the idea of Yorkshire tradition, the truth is simple. The tea isn't grown in Yorkshire. It's blended and packaged there, but the leaves come from the same global commodity system driving every other supermarket tea. Yorkshire Tea still feels familiar, comforting, and nostalgic, but the tea in your cup today is a product of industrial blending, long-distance sourcing, and plastic-sealed bags, not the romantic story printed on the box.